Hello everybody, I'm Dr. Indira from the Department of Life Sciences, Sujayanti College. In my lecture today, I shall be talking about the absorption of water in plants. I shall also be discussing about the structure involved in water absorption and its mechanism. So what is this absorption of water? Uptake of water by plant is called absorption of water. Plants absorb water from the soil through the root hairs, which are the only structures which come in contact with soil water. That water which is available for the plant is the capillary water present in the ground. The root hairs arise from the epidermal layer of the roots, and this zone of root hairs is called as the root hair zone. Plants are capable of absorbing water and nutrients dissolved in the soil with the help of the root hairs. And this is in the form of soil solution. Let us now look at the structure of the root hair. Root hairs are tubular structures or extensions which arise from the epidermis of the root. So when the root epidermis bears the root hair, it is also called as the piliferous layer of the root. The wall of the root hair is made up of pectic substances and cellulose, which are strongly hydrophilic, and that is the reason that they absorb water. They lack a cuticle and thus provide a large surface area. Each root hair measures about 0.5 to 1 centimeters in length and 10 micrometers in diameter. The plasma membrane lies next to the cell wall and it encloses the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm of the epidermis of the root is extended into the cytoplasm of the root hair. Inside the cytoplasm is also seen a well-defined nucleus and a vacuole. The vacuole is filled with cell sap, whose water potential is found to be more negative than the soil solution. Let us now see what happens when the soil water comes in contact with the root. The soil water is absorbed into the cell wall of the root hairs by the process of imbibition. The protoplast of the root hair is hypertonic while the soil water is hypotonic, and therefore, according to the principle of osmotic pressure, water moves from a region of lower osmotic pressure to a region of higher osmotic pressure. The osmotic pressure of the cell sap is usually between 3 to 8 atmospheres, while that of the soil water is less than 1 atmosphere. As a result, the root hair contains less water and has less turgor pressure. Because of high osmotic pressure and less turgor pressure of root hair cell, it results in an increased diffusion pressure deficit. Thus, this leads to the increase in the suction pressure of the root hairs. Water absorbed from the soil moves through the cortical cells of the root, and after crossing the cortical cells, it reaches the endodermis. The endodermal cells lying opposite to root hairs are specially modified to transport the absorbed water, and such endodermal cells are called passage cells. The passage cells are permeable to water because they lack Casparian strips. The other endodermal cells are provided with the Casparian thickenings which make it impermeable to water. The water from the passage cells move into the pericycle. From the pericycle, they travel into the xylem. From the xylem, the water absorbed now moves upwards unidirectionally to reach the leaves. The water moves from one cell to another cell due to the changes in the turgor pressure. Let us now look into the mechanism of water absorption. There are two ways in which water can be absorbed. One, which is called the active absorption, and the other, which is called the passive absorption. Let us talk about the active absorption of water. As the word says active, it involves the utilization of metabolic energy or ATP, which results or which is released during the respiration process. Active absorption can again be broadly classified into osmotic absorption and non-osmotic absorption. In the coming slides, we shall discuss about each of it separately. The theory of active osmotic absorption of water was proposed by Atkin and Priestley, according to which the hydrophilic cell walls of the root hairs imbibe the soil water. The osmotic pressure of the cell sap of the root hairs is found to be much higher when compared to the soil solution. Therefore, the diffusion pressure deficit and the suction pressure in the root hairs becomes much higher, and due to which the water is drawn from the soil into the root hairs. When water enters into the root hair, the osmotic pressure, the suction pressure, and the diffusion pressure deficit of the root hairs now become lower, while the turgor pressure is increased. The cortical cells lying adjacent to the root hairs comparatively have a higher osmotic pressure, suction pressure, and diffusion pressure in comparison to the root hair. Therefore, water is now drawn into the adjacent cortical cells from the root hair by osmotic diffusion. In this manner, water is drawn from one cell to another cell due to the osmotic gradient, and finally it reaches the innermost cells of the cortex lying just next to the endodermis. From the endodermis, through the passage cells, the water enters into the xylem, which now transports the water in an upward direction. This movement of water is basically caused or due to the osmotic gradient. So finally, water is drawn from one cell to another cell, and in this diagram you can see how the water moves from the root hair through the root epidermis into the cortical cells, reaches the passage cells of the endodermis, the pericycle, and the xylem cells. And thus water can move up to great heights through the xylem. And the pressure exerted is basically known as the root pressure. Let us now look into the active non-osmotic absorption of water. Sometimes we see that the absorption of water still takes place even when the osmotic pressure of the soil water is much higher than the osmotic pressure of the cell sap. This type of absorption, which is non-osmotic or against the osmotic gradient, requires the metabolic energy, and obviously it is released through respiration. Plant hormones like auxins stimulate the non-osmotic active absorption. And this concept of active non-osmotic absorption of water was proposed by Kramer in the year 1959. Let us now look into the passive absorption of water. As the word says, passive absorption, this method of water absorption does not require metabolic energy. The main forces generated are present in the aerial parts of the plant, that is in the leaves. Due to heavy transpiration, there is an internal water deficit created in the intercellular spaces of the leaf, which creates a kind of tension in the leaves, which gets transmitted through the xylem column, and this tension reaches even up to the root hairs. So the root hair only acts as a surface for water absorption, but the real forces which are meant for water absorption are generated in the aerial part of the shoot. Hence, this is called as passive absorption of water. During water absorption, the water may flow from one cell to the other cell in three different pathways, namely the apoplastic pathway, the symplastic pathway, and transmembrane pathway. In the apoplastic pathway, water moves exclusively through the cell wall without crossing any membranes. The apoplast is a continuous system of cell walls and intercellular air spaces in plant tissues. In the symplast pathway, water travels from one cell to the next through the plasmodesmata. The symplast comprises of an entire network of cell cytoplasm interconnected by plasmodesmata. In the transmembrane pathway, it is a route followed by water that sequentially enters the cell on one side and exits the cell on the other side, enters the next in a series, and it goes on. In this pathway, water crosses at least two membranes for each cell in its path. The plasma membrane on entering and on the exiting. Transport across the tonoplast is also involved. I hope this video has given you enough information about the absorption of water. Thank you for watching.